All right. We've saved the absolute best for last. Final episode of the conference previews leading up to the start of the 24-25 Michigan high school hockey season. We do so with previews of the two best leagues in the state, the KLAA and the MIHL. You've got legitimate state title favorites, legitimate junior and college hockey prospects, and the best coaches in the game. But first, if you're watching here on YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And if you're listening on Apple and Spotify, be sure to follow there as well. And if you want to join in on the conversation, be sure to connect with me on social media as well. You can find me on all the platforms. Just search PD's Picks. All right, now let's talk some hockey, shall we? I may be a little biased having coached in the KLAA for some time, but I think this conference has the perfect setup in terms of structure, format, scheduling, the whole nine. You got 10 teams, two divisions based off of geography, and that doesn't always mean the two divisions are competitively balanced, but still, bear with me. You play everybody once, plus a ranking game, matchups determined based off of last season's final ranking, I believe, in the My Hockey rankings. And then there's also a crossover game where the number one team from each division plays head to head. The number two teams from each division play head to head, 3, 4, 5, and so on. That 1v1 game at the end of the season, obviously being your conference championship game. So some of these leagues and conferences around the state, you'll play a team twice. You play one team twice and then another team only once, or you have two division champions, but no overarching conference champion. Some are small, only 5 or 6 teams. Others are big and chew up a lot of your game count when you only have 25 games to work with. So I just think the KLAA format is just the chef's kiss of high school hockey, in my opinion, there. So now you could debate, well, Brighton and Hartland and Howell all get crammed into the same division on the same side of the conference. And a lot of years, Brighton and Hartland have been the two best teams in the conference, yet only one of them ends up playing for the conference championship. And, this year, even all 3 Livingston County teams could be 1, 2, and 3 in the conference, which definitely creates that log jam. Or, you play Stevenson as one of your 9 conference games. You also match up with them for that ranking game, and you match up again with them for that crossover game. That's happened as well. So you do end up, inadvertently playing the same team 3 times in one season there. Those anomalies happen. No system is completely perfect or foolproof. But the KLAA format has a real, I'll call it a next level feel to it, almost like a college hockey conference or an SEC football type structure. Brighton is your defending champ heading into the season, a 2-time defending champ now. But prior to that, they actually hadn't won the conference in, I believe, 10 years. So they had snapped a bit of a long drought, and then now they're holding on to the top spot. But that was largely, in part, tied to a dominant 2024 class of Cam Duffney, Lane Petit, Charlie Birchfield, Levi Penela in net, and a couple others there that made for a really strong senior class last season that had racked up a lot of accolades over the years. That core group had been playing for the Bulldogs for the better part of 3 years, all of which are now gone, but the defending champs, I think, are still in good hands too. Tim Peterson was a standout freshman from last season who played on that top line with Cam Duffney. I think he's taken a huge step in his development this offseason. I talk about it all the time. I don't think you see a bigger jump in your game in high school hockey than between your freshman and sophomore seasons. Peterson looks like he could really develop and be a go-to guy for the Bulldogs this season. But he's young though, and the rest of the Bulldogs will be too. Connor Duffney, Caden O'Toole, Mitch Wysocki. Those were Wysocki. Sorry, excuse me. I was thinking Mike Wazowski there from Monsters Inc. Mitch Wysocki. There we go. Those were all guys that were competing in the MDHL this fall alongside Peterson. All of those guys are 2009 born prospects, if you can believe that, like Peterson. So Brighton graduates one wave of players, but welcomes in another wave of talent. And that group could set Brighton up for success for the next couple of years as well. Ryan Watkins, though, was a top D man in the MD this fall as well. I feel like he's gone from being a really good player last season to essentially controlling the game now as a senior. Looked very comfortable in the fall this season, I guess. He really, I thought, commanded the play while he's out there. Does a nice job taking away space defensively, moving pucks to where they need to go. He'll be a great veteran leader, I think, for that very young Brighton team. Freddie Londo, too, is another guy. Was out this fall. He's apparently a dual sport. He's a football guy here in the fall for the Bulldogs. That's not an easy transition. Very few guys out there can do both. I've talked about this on a previous podcast. My freshman football coach was an old Little Caesars guy from back in like the 70s or 80s, like early days, something like that. He knew I had played hockey or was a hockey player. And I remember him saying to me, Peterson, there's football players that play hockey and hockey players that play football, but you can't do both. So I hope to God you can play hockey, because he had obviously seen me play football and determined I was not much of a football player. He was right. I loved playing football. Played, 5 years of it growing up, and then obviously playing varsity football. But I was a way better hockey player than I ever was going to be as a football player. So shout out to all my dual sport football, hockey players out there. Freddie Londo included, obviously. Going from the gridiron and transitioning back to the rink over the next month or so is not easy and rarely a smooth transition. So I remember making that transition and putting on your hockey stuff, and you're putting on this tiny little hockey helmet after wearing this big, massive football helmet. And you're like, this thing's going to protect me? Like, God, it's just so small. You just, some of those things stand out to me thinking back on going from football to hockey. But okay, I want to get into Hartland a little bit here. This is my pick to win the KLAA this season. You can check that out on pdspicks.com. The blog is linked in the description below. They were a young team last season. Hartland and Stevenson both, really. I'll touch on the Spartans shortly. A lot of guys coming back for Hartland. Top forward Ian Castamo leading the charge there. This is a guy who you rarely see it at this level of hockey, but a guy who really makes others around him better. And it makes me wish I could play on a line with this kid, because I'm pretty sure he could turn me into an all-stater. He's just smart, high hockey IQ, constantly where he needs to be as the play unfolds, and casually just goes where he needs to go. Very little panic in his game. Just right place, right time kind of guy. Not going to wow you with an overwhelming amount of offense. He's I'll say only got 72 points in 78 career varsity games. But not sure there's anyone more valuable in high school hockey today than Castamo. You couple that with, you factor in a guy like Ty Kraut on the back end. He's got potential to be a real strong junior hockey player after graduation. Drew Lesperance likely becomes a running mate alongside Castamo offensively. Brady Snyder's role on this team could increase significantly from last season. The Eagles have some weapons, man. Like, if there's one team in the state that I think could compete with Detroit Catholic Central, it's going to be Hartland, I think. I mentioned Stevenson a minute ago. I wrote in the blog on pdspicks.com. By all accounts, this Stevenson team probably overachieved quite a bit last season with a 15-12-1 record. They won a regional title, and they did all of that with one senior on the roster. Never seen anything like it. Unofficially, the youngest team in Michigan high school hockey history last season. Has there ever been a team with no seniors? Like, that'd be the only way to top that. Uh, but anyways, one senior on the roster. Obviously, a ton of guys coming back from last season. Owen Hall, I think, is a top forward in the state. Colin Strobel is a top D in the state as well. Connor Buchanan had a huge fall in the MDHL. I also liked guys like Brendan Seiss and Dawson Wallace too. While I think expectations have changed mightily in Livonia, last season, obviously being the young, inexperienced team that just wanted to compete and show well on a nightly basis, to now being a legitimate threat in the KLAA and Division One. Let's not forget the Spartans will still be a young team this winter with potentially 14 juniors on the roster. So that championship window, if you want to call it that, I don't think that's really a thing necessarily at the high school levels, but if you want to refer to it as a championship window, I think that's really open for the next 2 years for Stevenson there. Hopes were high in Howell last season. I don't think I'm out of line or out of left field in saying that. I looked back at last season's KLAA preview. I had mentioned it wouldn't surprise me if Howell beat Livingston County rivals Brighton or Hartland or both. Ben Hootery, Joel Escola, Rory Sturos. That team had some dudes on it. They won 18 games, won a regional championship, but finished third in the division. Kind of a head scratcher there. The Highlanders have been that third place in a two-team race for much of the last few seasons, trailing your Brighton and Hartland there in Livingston County. But let's be honest, like whether it's Livingston County or the West Division of the KLAA, it's been Brighton or Hartland, and Howell gets that kind of little brother treatment. It makes me cringe to even say it, being a little brother myself. But this season feels different. First year head coach Keith Robertson, he's the real deal. I know him well, been on a staff with him, long-time assistant coach in high school hockey. He takes the reins for the Highlanders this season. He's one of the best minds in the game and just understands the hockey landscape really well too. You factor in key returners like last season's leading scorer, Ben Hootery, who I mentioned earlier. Rory Sturos is back as well. Marco Wolf was a Team Michigan guy last spring. Chad Patilla is one of the top defensemen, I think, from the class of 2026. There's some high-end players to work with here for Howell. And on top of that, this kid is so good. I had to add a caveat to my KLAA conference preview just for him specifically. I'm going to get to him in a second. I prefer to focus on returning players, and a lot of my previews and my talks on the podcast give the guys who have been here the attention first. Give them that shine first. And I don't want to – the other thing, too, is I don't want to speculate too much when it comes to other coaches' rosters and decisions this time of year. Assuming a kid or two is going to make a roster before tryouts are completed, I just don't feel right in doing that, I guess. But after seeing this kid in the MDHL, talking with Coach Robertson too, I couldn't not highlight Henry Lansky as the goalie to watch in the KLAA. Lansky was a top goalie for OJG 16s last season. That team was a top 25 team in the country. He was the MDHL's tournament team goalie for the 18s this fall, had the lowest goals against average at 1.96 and the best save percentage at 95% in MDHL league play. An all-star league that does not favor goalies. You hear me say that a lot. And he managed to put up video game numbers in it. So he could be the best goalie in the state. Playing in a league where a lot of the top goalies graduated, it was just hard for me not to put him in that conversation, knowing the impact he should have this season. So Howell's going to have some playmakers up front. playmakers on the back end, and you're going to have an elite goalie in net. I believe they beat Brighton this year. They may threaten Hartland as well. And if they take care of business there, they've got obviously a real shot at winning a KLAA championship too. Okay, a couple other notes from around the KLAA I wanted to get to. Let's not forget, Salem was in the conference championship last season. Important because top scorers Dom Chappett, Carson Patel, both of those guys are slated to be back this season, as is top defenseman Cam Eichner, as is starting goalie Mason Wines. Why couldn't the Rocks factor into the championship picture as well, right? Chappett is legit. He was a Team Michigan kid last spring, another top performer in the MDHL this fall. Played in the league showcase, played on a tournament team for them. He had 46 points last season as a junior, maybe even better this winter. So Eichner was a factor in the MDHL as well. Patel, they'll have one really legit line. Depth maybe yet to be determined. I'm just not as familiar, but definitely something to keep an eye on as the season unfolds. A couple other notes I'll get to here. Northville has some guys who can play too. Tommy Marinoff, he's led the Mustangs in scoring for 2 straight years now, and he's only going to be a junior this winter. Like, what? But put that into perspective for a minute. How many players do you know that led their team in scoring as a freshman and a sophomore and in line to do it again as a junior and beyond? I don't recall any offhand. Maybe some in the UP. I know Calumets and Hancocks of the world have had a lot of 4-year guys who were impact guys right away, but it'd take a lot of homework to find another comp to Marinoff in that regard. So that's pretty incredible. Alex McCollum is considered a top defenseman in this senior class. I've heard nothing but rave reviews about him, but I've yet to see him with my own eyes, actually. Both times I watched Northville last year, he was out with an injury, so just kind of unfortunate timing there. But he's a real strong skating puck mover type defenseman. So you got him. I liked Alex Coe a lot last season when I did catch the Mustangs. Decent footwork, some nice tools to his game. I could see him kind of taking a significant step in his development and being a bigger contributor to that offense. Only problem for the Mustangs is they're playing in the loaded KLAA West division. That program, I think, could really take the next step in their growth and development and just another step in the process, as we like to talk about as coaches, under Coach Ryan Ossenmacher. If they can win, with a win or two or a couple over your Salems and Brightons of the league, don't be surprised if the Mustangs pull off a KLAA upset or two this season, as well as a strong showing in out-of-conference games as well. Okay, so that was a lot of KLAA talk. Let me shift gears here. We'll get into the MIHL. It is the best league in Michigan high school hockey. There is no equal. No, not even the KLAA, as much as it pains me to say. You hate them because you ain't them. Your Brother Rices and your Trentons and Catholic Centrals, and just, it pains you because it's true, right? It's jealousy. It's okay. I feel it too. Same reason we here in Big Ten country hate the SEC, right? Because they're better than us and we know it. And truthfully, like, if schools weren't tied into other conferences, I think you'd see more hockey programs that would form these types of competitive leagues or try to join the MIHL. The KLAAs, the OKCs, OAAs, MACs, those types of conferences that are school specific and not sport specific. That kind of ties the hands a little bit of these programs from either joining an MIHL or forming their own competitive equivalent. This season marks 26 years of MIHL action, which is also pretty incredible. of which Detroit Catholic Central has won 17 championships, including last season, which was the program's fourth in a row. They make it a drive for five this winter. Their most dominant stretch in league play since the MIHL's inception, when it was formed prior to the 99-2000 season. I believe CC won the first 7 or 8 league championships right out of the gate. Shamrocks lost 78% of their offense from a season ago, either by way of graduation or just flat out departure, as the team's leading scorer from a season ago, Brooks Rogowski, embarked on his junior career in the OHL and actually scored his first goal the other night for Oshawa as well. So they lost a ton. There's going to be a lot of new faces in the lineup this season, but the expectations will absolutely be the same. You're going to have some first-year AAA players like Justin Bloink, Nino Sui, Sam Wolak, Sean Goff. They will certainly make immediate impacts to this lineup. Bloink was arguably the best defenseman in the MDHL this fall. He comes over from a CompuWare 16s team. I liked Sean Goff a lot. He's just an 09 coming from VH. May not play like top power play minutes or anything out of the gate yet, but you couple him with another young guy, Sam Masick, who played last year as a freshman. And CC is going to have some real good young talent to work with too, in addition to some of these first-year seniors. I mentioned Masick. He's grown a lot since last season. Doesn't look like a freshman on a varsity team anymore. They're going to be real strong on the blue line with him and Goff, like I mentioned. Sam Wolak, who was a Caesars 16s kid last year. And you get returner Nick Leiter back too. So I'm sure I'm missing a couple guys there, but that right there is four that would be the equivalent of most teams' top pair. So you're essentially got a 1A and a 1B right there. I talked about Masick and Leiter on previous podcasts as well. Leiter's looked good this fall. He's a big, strong kid that gets up and down the ice with pace, effective on the blue line. I really liked the way he got pucks through traffic, no dust-offs, just making the right plays and creating opportunities from the back end. They've won 64 consecutive games against in-state opponents. Their last loss coming in February of 2022 at the hands of De La Salle. That was the last team to knock off the Shamrocks. I mean, why would you even doubt them at this point, right? If I take CC and I give you the field, are you taking those odds to win a state title? I'm feeling pretty good. As long as CC has 2 JV teams, more AAA kids in the school than your average AAA team, period, there's no reason to pick against or pick anyone other than CC. They just have resources at their disposal that no one else in the state does. And it feels like that gap is getting wider too. If you want me to get a little hot takey, I can do that to a degree. I said earlier, I think Hartland could give CC a good game. They're solid contenders this season. I also think Orchard Lake is positioned to be a contender this season as well. Both Orchard Lake and Hartland fielded 2 varsity teams last season. I heard rumors too about Howell potentially fielding a second team this upcoming season. Same thing with CC. That may be the case this winter. I've had a couple conversations with Rick Gadwa and Keith Robertson about these moves and about this topic. And from a program perspective, I totally get it, right? It's an opportunity to get more kids in your program, competitive games, and challenging them to play at a higher level. Why keep kids down at the JV level if they're capable of competing against some of these other varsity teams? And if you've got the numbers to do it, why not? And I think to a degree, you're seeing the fruits of that labor for teams like Hartland and Orchard Lake, as those are the two that did it last year, and those are the two I think stand a chance against CC. But the flip side of that is it's a tough look for high school hockey as a whole. You've got 50 to 60 programs, maybe more, that are struggling to field just one team, and more co-ops every year, just so that they have enough bodies to put a team together, let alone be competitive. So, yeah, you've got other programs around the state with enough to field multiple teams. So I get both sides of it. I don't know what the right answer is necessarily. Is it just a matter of having a more competitive JV circuit for those teams to compete at, that do have enough players? Do you put a cap on the number of varsity teams by program? But then then you run the risk of chasing players away from high school hockey altogether. We can debate a lot of this all we want, but I think it really comes down to the real problem in all of this is the overall growth of the game. Whether you want to get mad about the rise in co-ops or the poor quality of AAA hockey in the state, or the number of imports that those programs are bringing in from out of state to play here, here's your real problem. There were 35,000 players registered for USA Hockey in the Michigan district last season. I believe that's the first time in at least 10 years that number was up year over year. First time in 10 years. For an entire decade, we had fewer hockey players in the state this year than the previous year until 23-24. 35,758 last season, to be exact, at least according to USA Hockey. That puts the Michigan district 9th out of 12 in USA Hockey, ahead of the Northern Plains, New England, and Atlantic districts. That ain't saying much for a state that's home to Hockey Town, the NTDP, a USHL team, and 7 Division I programs. You want to fix the CC problem. You want to fix the double varsity teams, the number of co-ops, the horribly watered down AAA scene in this state. It starts here. Grow the game. Get more kids playing and playing longer. And I think it's not an immediate fix. It would take a lot of time and a lot of years to see the fruits of that labor, but it starts at the grassroots. It starts at the youngest levels. So anyway, rant over there. I'll get back on track here with the MIHL. Orchard Lake, on the heels of having two varsity teams last season, I think they could be a real contender this season. Will Keene is one of the best goalie prospects we've had in high school hockey in quite some time. Just given his intangibles, his size, his athleticism, he'll get to play behind a real deep Eaglets team that should have a variety of contributors. And I think that list starts with Julian Johnston in particular. He's a great energy guy. I love the way he plays with and without the puck. That's important. Not enough guys play without the puck. That's a real nice feature of his game. Thaddeus Rainish, RJ Galatz, Matthew Murad. I don't see a lot of dominant individuals per se, but the collective could just absolutely overwhelm you. Very similar, I think, to how Marquette was last year. It wasn't necessarily one dominant line of playmakers for Marquette, or a stud forward you had to be aware of. It was just line after line after line of guys who could flat out play. And that's what I see here too, for Orchard Lake. Diesel Carrera on the back end. He's another guy. I'd probably say him on defense, and then Johnston up front are kind of your featured guys there for Orchard Lake. But then there's 6, 7, 8, 10 interchangeable guys that can kind of rotate and play and just grind you out. And as much of the intangibles as Will Keene has with his size and athleticism, like I was talking about, him and Trenton's Evan Sivi were kind of a 1A and 1B for MHA Red this fall. Sivi had a 1.34 goals against average and a 9.43 save percentage while splitting time and goal last season for Trenton. I'd expect him to kind of be the guy for the Trojans in net this season. He'll be a rare 4-year guy for Trenton and has played 13 or more games every year of his varsity career. That's pretty impressive. Trenton could be on the younger side this season, so having that experience in net could be a huge advantage, obviously, to just kind of steady the ship. MHA 16U team was all Trenton. I mentioned on a previous podcast, it was the Trenton show. Landon Leone, Patrick Rogowski, Donovan Durbin, Zach LeMay, basically an entire line of 2008 born Trenton kids. Plus, you got returning '07 Gabe Polivu. There's some young weapons to this Trenton team that could make them very scary. I was a Polivu fan last season. Loved his creativity with the puck and instincts for attacking the net. Heard glowing reviews about Donovan Durbin as well. That can make for a real good 1-2 punch offensively there. A couple other players around the league I like. Cam George, obviously. I came into the season last year pretty high on this kid. He's done nothing to change my mind otherwise. So still high on him again coming into this season. There aren't too many defensemen in high school hockey I would take over George. He's great footwork, smooth with the puck, competes well. Him, plus you got a guy like Roman Valaire, who's just a pure goal scorer. He's one of the more dangerous finishers in the game today. I liked Nick Timko a lot during Cranbrook's state championship run too. Garrett Dudler and Roman Seco drew a lot of the headlines, if you will, and rightfully so. But I thought Timko was really a complete player. He's got good size, plays with pace, nice puck skills. The Cranes lost a lot from last season, but I think there's a chance they could be a more skilled and talented team this year. A chance, you got to see it, got to prove it. But there's a chance, I think, that they could be just as talented, if not more, than the team that won a state championship last spring. I got a soft spot too for Gavin Zalkowski from De La Salle. He was good for the Pilots last season. A .932 save percentage, 2.13 goals against average. Numbers from the MDHL this fall aren't great, but like I've said before, this league doesn't favor goalies. When I watched him in action, he looked good. He was on at the MDHL, the game or two that I caught him for. Dylan Blackwood was a point per game guy for them last season. I don't know quite. I got one more here too. I don't quite know what to expect from a guy like Shane Bolton just yet. He was like a third liner, middle of the lineup type guy for De La Salle last season, more of a depth guy. But he was a high motor guy, work hard, great energy. He caught my attention every time I watched the Pilots play. So I don't know if that necessarily makes him a top go-to guy just yet. But like I said, he was a guy whose energy was visible and his impact on the game was noticeable. So that's good too. Let me see here. One more. Peter Sainin. I've talked a lot about CC already, but Sainin finished his junior season with 42 points. He was one of the better forwards in the MDHL this fall too. Shamrocks will have a lot of new guys in that lineup that will make an immediate and significant impact. But Sainin could still be looked at as that kind of go-to guy in that offense. So, okay. That was a lot. 13 conference previews over the last 5 episodes of the podcast to get you hyped and prepped for the upcoming Michigan high school hockey season. And I ain't done yet. Let me give you a few cliff notes on the independent programs from around the state as well. And this landscape has changed quite a bit this offseason too, and that's kind of why I'm making a point of it, because there's a lot of new independent programs, and it just opens the door. There's some conversations we just need to have, since some of these heavy hitting teams are now independents, in addition to some of the others that were major players last season. Houghton, SPARTA, Riverview, Gabriel Richard joining the independent fray. Bay Reps were a Final Four team last season. Sault Ste. Marie won a regional championship and might have had the best goalie in the state. There's some great hockey on the independent circuit. So I do want to spend a couple minutes talking about some teams and players of note there as well. Houghton is going to be good again. No surprise. I started putting together my preseason top 25 for next week's episode of the pod. Little teaser there. They just might be in my top 5. How about that for a little preview? Junior Connor Arco may be one of the best forwards in the state. Him and Jace DeForge present a matchup nightmare for most teams that they'll face this season. The Gremlins had a bunch of prospects playing for that 16U Wisconsin Wendigo team I've been talking about this fall. If you thought this team was going to fall by the wayside because they lost last season's goalie to Division I hockey, or they lost last season's top forward to playing in the North American League, or lost last season's top D who's now playing in Europe, you are wrong. And I made that mistake last season, 12 months ago, looking at the departures of Cam Markham and Gabrick Carlson, who are both playing high-level junior. I thought those were going to be tough losses to overcome. They reloaded again with top talent. They're going to reload again this season with top talent. You look at Arco, DeForge, Noah Millette, Hudson Markham. Some of these guys, it's just next man up, right? It'll be a tough schedule, top talent, great coaching. Gremlins will yet again be a factor this winter. I'll stay in the UP here for a minute too. I think the Sioux could be contenders again too. They kind of came out of nowhere last season, ended up being a perennial top 25 team, won a regional championship, and had some real studs on that team. Cam Labadie was huge for them last season. That's a big void to fill. He was incredible in net, and I don't know that you can duplicate his production. But even without Labadie, though, leading scorer Nick Wood should be back. I liked Corson Pace a lot last season, too. Him and Cam George from Rice, who I was just talking about earlier, I think they're very similar style players. Smaller, smooth, puck-moving type guy. Cam Gagnon is another one that jumped out to me watching that Sault Ste. Marie team at the MIHL showcase last season. Gagnon, his feet were always moving, flowing well in that offensive zone. I would love to see more of these Sioux kids play at a higher level, play junior hockey. And I think that starts with, competing at Team Michigan in the spring. And that would be a good stepping stone, getting them more involved in the MIHL showcase. I know they were participants last year, but getting them downstate a little bit more and getting more eyes on these kids from the Sioux. They absolutely have guys that are capable of playing junior hockey. They had a guy or two last year, and I think that were capable and should have another prospect or two capable of playing on again this season. So there's just a lot of potential there with that Blue Devils team. Okay, a couple more. SPARTA, a new addition to the independent circuit. They have left the OKC. That was a fun team to watch last season. They won 23 games, and that was no mistake. And while they may not match that win total, I do expect the Spartans to be more of a factor on the statewide scene this time around. Caden Gleason is a legit gamer, 36 goals, 65 points. Strength of schedule was middle of the pack, and maybe with them becoming an independent, that schedule gets a little more difficult this winter. Would be a good challenge for a guy like Gleason, Trevor Serba, Tanner Guara. Great, those guys were great energy guys, work hard, scrappy. This is a team that I think is ready to be challenged. Only graduated 3 seniors last season. I think Sparta keeps that momentum going as a program and takes yet another step in the building process. Can they be a contender and earn some hardware at season's end, get a regional championship, be in that state tournament? I'm not ruling it out depending on the draw and how things shake out. So, okay, buckle up. Listen to this. East Grand Rapids, Grand Rapids Catholic Central, Detroit Catholic Central, Flint Powers, Houghton, Trenton, Salem, Stevenson. That's the bulk of Riverview Gabriel Richard's independent schedule this season. They're also playing in the Chelsea Showcase. They're also playing in the MIHL Showcase. And they're playing in a showcase in Chicago near the beginning of the season as well. These are the benefits of being an independent and being able to load up your schedule. But are the Pioneers ready to step up to that challenge? That's 8 teams that were ranked in the top 25 last season. I hope guys like Connor Forster and Michael Taucher are up for that challenge because shit's about to get real. Rick DeSanta is a smart coach, though. He wouldn't be making this move if he didn't think he had the horses to do it. Taucher was a freshman last season who finished with 27 points. Santino Venturini, Mason Eshelman, those guys were also freshmen last season, significant contributors as well. I'm assuming this move to independent coincides with that strong 2027 class. And this could be a 2 or 3 year project for the Pioneers. New challenges, new opportunities. As a fellow coach, that excites me. That's really cool. Okay. One more team here I wanted to get to. I got to touch on the Bay Reps for a moment. They graduated everybody last season. They only graduated 5 seniors, but that quintet accounted for 82% of the team's offense. I've never seen anything like that before. I mentioned CC losing 78% to now lose 4 out of every 5 goals scored with your senior class. They get a pretty good sized 2025 and 2026 class back from last season, but they've got some big roles to fill on that team. And who's going to step up and take the reins of the offense? There's a lot of potential with this group, but I think there's also a bit of a long road to get there. And success may not be measured, by a Final Four appearance, but maybe more just competing night in and night out, being better today than you were yesterday, just continuing to move the needle in terms of development. Might be more of an underdog than a favorite this winter, but still a team to make note of and keep eye on. All right, conference previews, done. Tryout week, done, or should be. I mean, come on. All the coaches I know, you've done enough spring, summer, and fall hockey. You know who you got by now. I don't know how many real cuts are made this time of year. I could be wrong, but I mean, if you don't know who's in your school or who's coming out by now, like at this point in the season, you got a real problem. Week 1 is not the time to be doing your homework on the program. So next week, I teased the preseason top 25. We'll get into that. I will unveil that on next week's episode. The only preseason ranking in Michigan high school hockey, and you can find it right here on the PD's Picks podcast. Also, I took a stab at my first draft of the top 100 names to know returning to Michigan high school hockey. We'll do that on the next episode of the pod, so that'll be right on the cusp of regular season games getting underway. First time through, I'm at 110 players, probably could be at 120 or 130. 62 different programs represented as of now. I've got a lot more work to do before any of that gets unveiled. But that's coming your way as well. So subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow on Apple and Spotify, and connect with me on social media to stay up to date on everything Michigan high school hockey. Skate hard, have fun. I'll see you at the rink soon.